You know what they say about luxury cruise ships. They're unsinkable, perfectly safe, and absolutely nothing can go wrong. Well, apparently nobody told that to the asteroid field surrounding Xerion Prime, because the cosmic wanderer just became the galaxy's most expensive firework display. Maya Rodriguez had exactly 37 seconds to appreciate the irony before her escape pod slammed into what could generously be called dirt, but was more accurately described as hostile alien real estate with commitment issues. Well, Maya said, unbuckling herself from a seat that had definitely seen better decades, this is just fantastic. She pushed open the pod door and stepped onto a planet that looked like someone had given a sadistic landscape architect unlimited funding and daddy issues. The welcome committee was already forming. Not the kind with balloons and refreshments, mind you, but the kind with teeth, claws, and what appeared to be a serious case of hunger management problems. Maya couldn't see them yet, but she could feel eyes on her, lots of eyes. The kind that typically belonged to things that considered humans a well-balanced breakfast. Xerion Prime, according to the tourist brochures she'd been forced to read during maintenance shifts, was the galaxy's premier predator preserve. A place where the universe's most dangerous creatures could roam free and do what dangerous creatures do best, which mostly involved eating things that moved and occasionally things that didn't. Of course it's a predator planet, Maya muttered, checking her supply pack. Because why would I crash somewhere nice? Like a spa planet. Or a planet with decent coffee shops. Her inventory was about as encouraging as a tax audit. One emergency ration pack, a basic medical kit, a maintenance multi-tool that was probably more scared than she was, and a water purifier that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd never actually seen water. The local wildlife was getting bolder. Maya could hear rustling in the undergrowth, the kind of rustling that suggested very large things with very sharp appendages were having a conference about her immediate future. The trees, if you could call them trees, looked like they'd been designed by a Gothic architect having a particularly bad day. Everything was either covered in thorns, dripping with suspicious substances, or making noises that suggested it was personally offended by her continued existence. Right, Maya said, shouldering her pack and scanning the horizon for somewhere that wasn't immediately trying to kill her. Step 1. Find shelter. Step 2. Figure out how to not die. Step 3. Contemplate the life choices that led to taking a maintenance job on a cruise ship full of rich idiots with more money than survival instincts. She started walking toward what looked like a cave system in the distance, keeping her movements steady and purposeful. In the shadows of the alien jungle, dozens of predators watched her go. They saw prey walking with odd confidence, prey that didn't run or panic or do any of the things prey was supposed to do. How interesting, they thought. How very, very stupid. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that Maya Rodriguez had spent the last 15 years trying very hard to forget how to kill things efficiently. She'd taken the maintenance job specifically because it was quiet, peaceful, and involved absolutely zero tactical situations requiring creative violence. The predators of Xerion Prime were about to learn why that had been a really, really good idea. For everyone except them. Meet Creix, alpha predator and self-appointed president of the local Let's Eat the Human Committee. Creix had 8 legs, approximately 47 teeth, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having met anything that could fight back effectively. He'd been watching Maya for 6 hours now, and he was getting impatient. She just walks, Creix chittered to his pack, mandibles clicking with frustration. No running. No screaming. No proper prey behavior at all. His lieutenant, a charming creature named Skitter who looked like a spider, had gotten into a fight with a chainsaw and lost, nodded agreement. Maybe she's broken? Defective prey unit? Meanwhile, in the shadow of the northern ridge, Venom was having similar thoughts. Venom was what happened when evolution decided to take the concept of silent but deadly and give it a PhD in applied murder. 6 feet of coiled muscle, optical camouflage, and a personality that made serial killers look friendly. Venom had never met prey that didn't immediately recognize its place in the food chain. But this human was setting up camp with a methodical precision that was frankly insulting. Maya had found her cave, checked it thoroughly for existing tenants. and was now arranging her meager supplies with the kind of organizational efficiency that came from years of keeping spaceship systems running. She'd built a small fire, purified some water, and was currently examining the local flora with the critical eye of someone who knew the difference between edible and will make your intestines file for divorce. "Fascinating specimens," she murmured, holding up a purple root that was trying to bite her finger. "Clearly evolved defensive mechanisms. Probably tastes terrible, but might be useful for other applications." From his perch on the volcanic outcropping to the south, Gorath the Render watched this display with growing confusion and rage. Gorath was what passed for an apex predator on Xerion Prime. 12 feet of armored fury with claws that could slice through starship hull plating and a temper that made volcanic eruptions seem calm and reasonable. Gorath had eaten everything on this planet at least once. He was the reason the Galactic Tourism Board had to post warnings in 17 languages and 3-dimensional formats. He was the stuff of nightmares that gave other nightmares therapy. And this tiny, soft, obviously defenseless human was completely ignoring him. "What is it doing?" Gorath roared, his voice echoing across the preserve like an avalanche having an argument with a tornado. The other predators paused their stalking to consider this excellent question. What was it doing? Maya had finished her camp setup and was now knitting. Well, not exactly knitting, but she was doing something with salvaged fabric and metal wire that looked suspiciously domestic. "Making nest?" suggested Skitter. "Prey doesn't make nests," Crick snarled. "Prey runs. Prey hides. Prey provides entertaining chase before inevitable consumption." Venom, who had managed to get within 30 feet of Maya's position without triggering so much as a glance in his direction, was beginning to suspect that something was fundamentally wrong with this picture. In his considerable experience, Prey had survival instincts. This human appeared to have survival instincts that had gone on vacation and forgotten to leave a forwarding address. Maya finished her project, which turned out to be a rather ingenious tripwire system connected to several small but loud noisemakers fashioned from empty supply containers. She tested it once, nodded with satisfaction, and settled down to eat her dinner while reading what appeared to be a technical manual she'd salvaged from the pod. "The local ecosystem shows clear signs of engineered predator enhancement," she said conversationally to nobody in particular. "Somebody went to a lot of trouble to make this place as deadly as possible. Which means they probably didn't account for adaptive behavioral responses from non-native species." Crix's pack was getting restless. They'd been watching potential prey for hours, and their hunting instincts were screaming at them to attack. But something about the human's casual demeanor was triggering warning signals that millions of years of evolution had hardwired into their reptilian brains. "She's not afraid," whispered one of the younger pack members, a nasty piece of work called Ripper, who had never encountered anything that didn't immediately try to escape from him. "Everything is afraid," Crix replied, but he sounded less certain than usual. Maya finished her meal, carefully cleaned her utensils, and began preparing for sleep. She laid out her bedroll in a position that gave her clear sightlines to all cave entrances, kept her multi-tool within easy reach, and arranged her remaining supplies in a pattern that looked random but definitely wasn't. Then she did something that made every predator within a mile freeze in confusion. She smiled. It wasn't a nervous smile, or a crazy smile, or any of the smiles that prey typically displayed when faced with imminent death. It was the smile of someone who had just realized that they were going to enjoy what came next far more than they probably should. And for the first time in their predatory lives, the apex hunters of Xerion Prime felt something they'd never experienced before. They felt like maybe, just maybe, they were in over their heads. Dawn on Xerion Prime came with all the subtlety of a tactical nuclear sunrise, and Crix decided it was time to remind the universe why he was the apex predator around these parts. Well, one of the apex predators. There was some debate about the rankings, mostly involving who had eaten whom more recently. Maya was awake before the artificial sun cleared the horizon, which should have been the first warning sign. The prey that woke up early was prey that had been prey long enough to develop habits. Smart prey was dangerous prey, but Crix had never been one for philosophical contemplation when there was hunting to be done. Time to feed. He clicked to his pack, 8 of them in total, each one a masterpiece of engineered lethality with personal space issues and table manners that would make a garbage disposal look refined. They moved in perfect formation, a ballet of death that had been practiced on hundreds of previous meals. Surround, intimidate, drive toward the killing zone, then feast. Simple, elegant, effective. Maya was sitting by her fire, apparently absorbed in rewiring her multi-tool with components from the escape pod's electronics. She looked up as the pack emerged from the undergrowth, took in the circle of razor-sharp death surrounding her, and said, "Oh, well, this is inconvenient." Creeks expected screaming. He expected running. He expected the usual prey response of panic followed by the entertaining but ultimately futile struggle for survival. Instead, Maya sighed, set down her improvised electronics project, and stood up with the kind of casual movement that suggested she was mildly annoyed rather than terrified. "I don't suppose we could postpone this until after I've had my coffee?" she asked conversationally. "No? Okay then, let's get this over with." What happened next violated several fundamental laws of predator-prey dynamics, and at least 3 principles of basic physics. Maya's multi-tool, it turned out, had been extensively modified. The cutting laser, originally designed for minor electrical repairs, had been souped up with the escape pod's power cell and was now capable of cutting through considerably more than insulation. Ripper discovered this when his head suddenly became detached from the rest of him in a way that defied his personal expectations about continued existence. The tripwires Maya had set up the night before weren't just for early warning. They were connected to a series of improvised explosive devices made from the pod's emergency fuel cells, positioned at exactly the right height to target major arteries and other important bits that most creatures preferred to keep inside their bodies. Skitter learned this lesson with the kind of educational experience that was both brief and permanent. But Maya's real advantage wasn't her improvised weapons or her tactical preparation. It was the fact that she moved like someone who had done this dance before, many times, and had never particularly enjoyed the music but had gotten very, very good at the steps. She didn't fight like prey. She fought like a predator who had been rudely interrupted during a peaceful retirement and was expressing her displeasure through interpretive violence. Creeks watched 5 of his pack members become abstract art installations in the span of 30 seconds and experienced what philosophers might call an existential crisis, but which he recognized as the much more immediate problem of having severely miscalculated the difficulty level of this particular hunt. "A treat," he screamed, which was the first time in his evolutionary history that word had been part of his vocabulary. Maya let him go, not out of mercy, but because someone needed to spread the word that the new arrival wasn't quite what she appeared to be. Word of mouth was important in establishing proper neighborhood relationships. She sat back down by her fire, picked up her electronics project, and resumed work as if she hadn't just redecorated her cave entrance with abstract expressionist predator remains. "Note to self," she said, testing the modified multi-tool's power settings. "The local wildlife lacks proper manners. Consider posting clearer boundaries." Away from his hiding spot in the ridge above, Venom watched this entire display with the growing realization that he might need to reconsider his hunting strategy. The human had just eliminated half a pack of Xerion Prime's most efficient killers with the kind of casual brutality typically reserved for professional exterminators. Gorath, who had witnessed the entire encounter from his volcanic perch, felt his rage building to levels that would have concerned seismologists if any had been present. Something small and soft and obviously inferior had just made his planet look bad, and that was the kind of insult that demanded immediate and overwhelming response. But for the first time in his apex predator career, Gorath decided that maybe, just maybe, he should observe this human a little longer before making his move. Maya finished her electronics work, tested her upgraded equipment, and smiled that same unsettling smile from the night before. "Much better," she said. "Now, where were we?" Venom prided himself on being a professional. While Creeks had relied on brute force and intimidation, and Gorath preferred the direct approach of overwhelming violence, Venom was an artist. He was the kind of predator that made other predators nervous, the kind that appeared in nightmares that woke up screaming. He was also, as of 3 days ago, the only predator on Xerion Prime who hadn't underestimated the human. Maya had established a routine that was both maddeningly predictable and impossible to exploit. She woke before dawn, performed what appeared to be some kind of physical conditioning routine that involved movements too quick and precise for someone who claimed to be a maintenance worker, gathered food and water, worked on various projects involving salvage technology, and prepared for the night with the methodical thoroughness of someone who expected company. An invited company with poor social skills and aggressive dietary requirements. Venom had been stalking her for 72 hours, using every technique that had made him the apex predator's apex predator. He could become virtually invisible, move without sound, and strike from angles that violated geometry. He had killed creatures that most predators wouldn't hunt on a dare. The problem was that Maya Rodriguez appeared to know he was there. Not in the usual prey way, where they sensed danger and became jumpy and paranoid. Maya knew exactly where he was, approximately when he moved, and seemed to be adjusting her daily routine to accommodate his stalking schedule with the kind of courtesy typically reserved for house guests. "Interesting camouflage adaptation," she said on the second day, apparently addressing a tree that definitely hadn't been there that morning. "Optical refraction, combined with active camouflage, very sophisticated. Probably requires significant energy expenditure to maintain." Venom froze, which was already his default state. But now it was his panic default state. "Energy expenditure means metabolic needs," Maya continued, setting up what appeared to be a small distillation apparatus. "Which means you'll need to hunt regularly, which means you're probably getting hungry about now." She finished her setup and moved to the other side of her camping area, leaving what looked like a perfectly clear approach to her position. Venom studied the apparent opportunity with the paranoid attention of someone who had survived this long by assuming everything was a trap. It was definitely a trap. Maya had been busy during her 3 days of apparent routine. The clearing around her cave now contained approximately 17 different ways to die, most of them involving repurposed cruise ship components and a truly creative understanding of applied physics. The distillation apparatus wasn't for water purification. It was for creating something that would burn very hot and very fast when exposed to the right catalyst. The catalyst being a proximity sensor made from her escape pod's navigation system. Venom discovered this when he finally made his move on the third night, confident that he had mapped every possible trap and counter move. He approached from the blind spot he'd identified, moving with the silent precision that had made him legend among the predator community. Maya was sleeping, or appeared to be sleeping, which should have been the second warning sign. The first warning sign had been that everything seemed too easy, but Venom had reached the point where hunger was overriding caution. The proximity sensor triggered when he was 3 feet from Maya's bedroll. The distillation apparatus exploded with the kind of enthusiasm typically reserved for solar flares. The improvised napalm spread in a pattern that Maya had calculated to cover exactly the approach angle that any invisible stalker would have to use. Venom stopped being invisible and started being on fire, which was a career change he handled about as well as expected. Maya sat up, watched the brief but spectacular light show, and made a note on a piece of salvaged material. Fatal Predator Variant 3 defeated. Note: adaptive camouflage ineffective against broad-spectrum area denial weapons. From his perch, Gorath watched another of Xerion Prime's apex predators become a cautionary tale and felt his rage evolve into something approaching strategic thinking. The human had now eliminated 2 different hunting approaches using completely different tactical responses. She wasn't just lucky. She wasn't just well prepared. She was thinking 3 moves ahead of creatures that had spent millions of years perfecting the art of murder. Maya settled back into her bedroll, but not before making several small adjustments to her perimeter defenses. As she did, she hummed a little tune that sounded suspiciously like a military marching song. "Tomorrow's going to be interesting," she said to the night. "I can already tell that someone's planning to try the direct approach. It should be fun." Gorath, who had indeed been planning exactly that, felt something he'd never experienced before in his apex predator career. He felt outmatched. and for the first time since arriving on Xerion Prime, he wondered if maybe he should consider a career change. Preferably somewhere very far away from Maya Rodriguez. Gorath the Render had earned his name through a simple but effective career strategy. He rendered things. Buildings, vehicles, other apex predators who got above themselves. Entire geological formations that annoyed him. Subtlety was for creatures who weren't confident in their ability to solve problems through overwhelming application of force. But after watching Maya systematically dismantle two of Xerion Prime's finest hunters, Gorath decided that maybe, just maybe, a more measured approach was called for. That lasted exactly 12 minutes. Maya was working on something new, another electronics project that involved components she'd salvaged from deeper in the wreckage field. She'd been hiking back and forth for 2 days, gathering materials with the systematic thoroughness of someone working from a very specific shopping list. The project appeared to be some kind of communications array, which suggested she was trying to call for rescue. This was unacceptable for several reasons, not least of which was that Gorath had a reputation to maintain. Word was already spreading through the Preserve's predator community that the human was somehow responsible for the recent disappearances of Crix's pack and Venom. Gorath's solution to reputation management was characteristically direct: remove the human, remove the problem, maintain status as undisputed apex predator of Xerion Prime. He came at Maya like a natural disaster with personal grievances, moving faster than something his size had any right to move. 12 feet of armored death accelerating to highway speeds with the kind of focused malice that had made him the stuff of legend. Maya looked up from her work, tracked his approach with the casual interest of someone watching weather, and said, "Oh good." The direct approach. "I was wondering when you'd get tired of being subtle." Then she did something that redefined Gorath's understanding of physics, probability, and basic survival instincts. She charged right back at him. What happened next was less a fight and more a comprehensive demonstration of why human beings had managed to become the dominant species on a planet that was actively trying to kill them from the moment they evolved. Opposable thumbs. Maya Rodriguez, it turned out, had not spent the last 15 years as a maintenance worker because she was tired of her previous career. She'd spent the last 15 years as a maintenance worker because she was very, very good at her previous career. And her previous career had involved teaching other sapient species why picking fights with humans was a mistake that civilizations tended to make exactly once. Gorath discovered this when Maya demonstrated that human reflexes, properly trained and maintained, could make 12 feet of armored fury look slow and clumsy. He learned about human tool usage when Maya's improvised weapons turned out to be considerably more sophisticated than they appeared. He gained new insights into human tactical thinking when he realized that every single move she made had been calculated to drive him into a position where his size and strength became disadvantages rather than assets. But the real education came when Maya explained, in calm and conversational tones while systematically dismantling his attack strategies, exactly what she'd been doing for the 15 years before she'd decided to try civilian life. "Special Operations, Terran Diplomatic Corps," she said, using Gorath's own momentum to redirect him into a rock formation that had been minding its own business until now. 3 tours with the Pacification Division, 2 with Strategic Intervention, 1 very classified stint with the Department of Aggressive Negotiations. Gorath tried to process this information while simultaneously trying to process the fact that a creature 1/10 his size was treating him like an inconveniently placed piece of furniture. And the thing about diplomatic work, Maya continued, introducing Gorath's face to several previously uninvolved boulders, is that sometimes negotiation requires demonstrating why the other party should want to reach an agreement. She stepped back, breathing hard but not winded, and watched Gorath attempt to recalibrate his understanding of the food chain. "I took the maintenance job because I was tired of explaining to people why they didn't want to fight humans. Thought it would be peaceful. Relaxing, no tactical situations requiring creative violence." Gorath, who was discovering that several of his major structural components had been relocated to places where they weren't traditionally supposed to be, made a sound that was part roar, part whimper, and entirely an expression of existential confusion. But apparently, Maya said, picking up a piece of equipment that had been knocked loose during the altercation, "The universe has a sense of humor." She looked around at the wreckage that had recently been Xerion Prime's most feared predator and shook her head. "You know what the real problem is with you apex predator types?" she asked conversationally. "You never learned to adapt. You found something that worked and just kept doing it until you forgot there might be other options." Gorath tried to respond, but his vocal apparatus was currently having philosophical differences with his respiratory system about their relative positions. "Humans adapt," Maya said. "It's what we do. It's literally the only thing we're better at than anyone else. Everything else. Some species does better, but adaptation. That's our specialty." She shouldered her pack and started walking away, then paused and looked back. "Oh, and Gorath, next time you decide to hunt something, maybe do a little research first. Could save you a lot of trouble." As Maya disappeared into the jungle, Gorath the Render had what philosophers might call an epiphany, but which he experienced as the sudden realization that maybe, just maybe, he had chosen the wrong career path. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear Maya humming that same military marching song. And for the first time in his apex predator career, Gorath the Render decided that retirement was looking pretty attractive. 3 days later, the rescue ship Persistent Optimism dropped out of hyperspace with all the fanfare of a municipal garbage collection service and immediately began wondering why their scanners were picking up what appeared to be a small-scale war zone. Captain Jenkins, a man whose natural expression suggested he'd been personally disappointed by everything that had ever happened to him, studied the readings with the kind of professional pessimism that came from 20 years of rescuing people who probably shouldn't have needed rescuing in the first place. "Sensor report, Lieutenant Torres," he said, settling into his command chair with the enthusiasm of someone sitting down to review tax forms. "Multiple energy discharges over the past week, sir. Significant structural damage to local terrain. Biosigns suggest major disruption to the preserve's ecosystem." Torres paused, rechecking her instruments. "Also, sir, we're picking up what appears to be organized storage activity." "The organized storage activity?" "Someone's been arranging things, sir, in patterns. Like a museum display." Jenkins rubbed his temples. "Please tell me we're not dealing with another art installation incident." "Unknown, sir. But we're receiving a standard rescue beacon from the crash site. Single human life sign." 20 minutes later, the rescue team found Maya Rodriguez sitting by a carefully maintained campfire, reading what appeared to be a technical manual, and surrounded by what could generously be described as the galaxy's most disturbing natural history exhibit. The remains of Xerion Prime's apex predator population had been arranged with the kind of meticulous attention to detail typically reserved for natural history museums and serial killer crime scenes. Each specimen was properly labeled with improvised markers indicating species, hunting methodology, and cause of termination. Maya looked up from her reading as the rescue team approached, marked her place with a piece of salvaged metal, and said, "Oh good, you're here. I was starting to run out of reading material." Lieutenant Torres, who had seen enough rescue operations to develop strong opinions about survivor psychology, stared at the display with the kind of professional fascination typically reserved for traffic accidents involving physics violations. "Man," she said carefully, "did you arrange all this?" "Well, I couldn't just leave them lying around," Maya replied, as if this was the most reasonable thing in the universe. "Poor habitat management. Plus, someone might trip over them." Captain Jenkins surveyed the scene with the expression of a man who was already composing the report he really didn't want to write. "Rodriguez Maya, maintenance worker, cosmic wanderer," he read from his datapad. "According to your file, you have no military background, no survival training, and no experience with hostile wildlife management." Maya looked at him with the patient expression of someone explaining something obvious to someone slow. "That's correct," she said. "Then how exactly did you?" Jenkins gestured vaguely at what had recently been the preserve's entire predator population. "They started it," Maya said with the tone of someone stating a simple fact. "I just finished it. With extreme prejudice and improper tool usage." She stood up, shouldered her pack, and started walking toward the rescue shuttle. "Oh, and Captain, You might want to update the tourist brochures. The whole deadly predator preserve thing is a bit oversold now. Might want to rebrand it as a peaceful nature sanctuary. Very quiet. Excellent for meditation retreats. As they walked to the shuttle, Torres fell into step beside Maya and asked the question that had been bothering her since they'd landed. "Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, what exactly did you do before you became a maintenance worker?" Maya smiled, that same unsettling smile that had become the last thing several apex predators had ever seen. "I was retired," she said simply. "Tired from what?" "Being very good at my job." 6 months later, the Galactic Tourism Board quietly redesignated Xerion Prime as a human cultural heritage site and converted the former Predator Preserve into the galaxy's newest diplomatic embassy. The official reason given was improved interspecies understanding and cultural exchange. The unofficial reason, known only to a few select individuals in the Galactic Diplomatic Corps, was that Maya Rodriguez had filed a formal complaint about the quality of her vacation. And the tourism board had decided that settling her grievances was considerably less expensive than explaining to the human government why their retired special operations personnel were being used as involuntary entertainment for alien wildlife. Maya herself returned to her maintenance job aboard the Cosmic Wanderer's replacement vessel, because she was widely regarded as the most competent and frighteningly efficient maintenance worker in the known galaxy. She never spoke about her experience on Xerion Prime, except to occasionally mention to difficult passengers that she'd recently returned from a very relaxing vacation and was feeling much more centered about conflict resolution. Strangely enough, passenger complaints dropped to nearly zero after that. And in the deepest files of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, Maya Rodriguez's service record remained classified at levels that most government officials didn't know existed, with a single notation added after the Xerion Prime incident. Retirement status confirmed. Do not disturb unless galactic civilization is ending. Even then, ask politely. Because sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that's trying very hard to be civilized. And sometimes trying very hard isn't quite hard enough.